He was given clear instructions. All he needed to do was take the car to the mechanic down the road. The mechanic will provide you with a duffel bag and tell you where to take it. Don't bring the duffel bag home. She had been in her husband's care for more than an hour now, and she felt left in the dark about what was happening. She took the first left she saw, which led her to the mechanic. What they discovered inside the car will profoundly alter her life. Hillary's choice to marry Don felt like the safest option. The pair met at college in Los Angeles, but her friends constantly told her not to get with him because he was bad news. However, she couldn't deny her feelings. She was in love with him. Hillary was pursuing her nursing degree, and Don was completing his finance degree. By the time they finished college, they were smitten. However, Hillary was unaware of all the pain and sadness Don would bring into her life. Hillary married Don at the age of 28. The pair dated for more than 10 years when Don got down on one knee and asked her to be his wife. They both managed to find jobs that paid well and immediately started their life together. Despite the fact that their home was full of joy, disaster was on the way. When Hillary and Don decided that they wanted a child, their lives took a turn for the worst. They always knew that they wanted to have children, however, they seemed to have problems conceiving. After numerous attempts, the pair began to grow increasingly frustrated. The couple held each other responsible for their misfortune. But on one uneventful Tuesday morning, everything changed. After 2 years of marriage, Hillary finally fell pregnant. It was as if all their frustration and anger towards one another had simply disappeared. When she learned she was pregnant, she embraced Don and shared the good news. There was more good news to come. Don was busy working on his laptop when Hillary rushed to him. What Don said next was a surprise to everyone. For the most part of their marriage, Don and Hillary lived in an apartment building. When Hillary went to go tell Don that she was pregnant, he shared that he had bought a home in a great suburb outside of the city, the perfect place to raise their child. He gave Hillary a big hug as he told her the great news. She felt overcome by emotions as she realized that things were finally falling into place. She was completely unaware of what her spouse was up to behind closed doors. The couple moved to a beautiful suburb just outside of Los Angeles. It was a large house, much larger than what Hillary initially thought. It was a good suburb in a gated community close to the beach. Hillary's heart warmed as the next phase of their life finally began. She wanted to find out how they could even afford such an expensive place, but she pushed the thought to the back of her mind. It wouldn't be long before things started to fall apart. The pair barely lived in their home for 2 years when things began falling apart. When Hillary returned home one evening, she discovered the authorities in her home questioning her babysitter. Don was busy with work, and only the nanny was in the home. Hillary recently hired her to help with their child. She sent the sitter home, and Hillary began speaking to the authorities, questioning them as to why they were in her home. The police could barely answer her questions when the phone rang. "Aren't you going to answer that?" The police officer asked Hillary as she turned her phone off. It was a strange number, and she was more concerned to find out why the police were at her home. However, the person kept calling, and eventually, Hillary went to a different room to answer her phone. She thought it was some teenager playing a prank on her, but the reality was far worse. "Hillary, honey," it was her husband. He sounded out of breath, almost like he had been running. "I want you to listen carefully, okay?" Hillary's eyes locked with one of the officers and gave them a fake smile. "The cops are in our living room," Don explained. "I know. Later, I'll explain. Please tell them you have a work emergency and follow my instructions to the letter. Okay?" Hillary gave a nervous laugh, thinking everything that was happening was a joke. Her husband always loved goofing around from time to time, and she knew this was one of those times. But there was a seriousness to his voice that had never been there before, and Hillary was starting to see that something was terribly wrong. "I'm sorry, officers," Hillary said from across the room. She shrugged her shoulders with a scrunch of her nose. "Work stuff." She calmly walked into the kitchen and asked Don what was happening. He didn't explain, only told her she needed to take his car from their garage and drive to their local mechanic. She was to receive a bag from him, and he'd tell her where to take it. Hillary drove out of their garage as calmly as she could. She was unsure of what was happening, but she knew her husband was in trouble. She reached the mechanics faster than she thought she would, hoping the police weren't on her trail yet. She didn't need to explain anything to the mechanic, who saw her and came running with a brown duffel bag. What was happening? The mechanic didn't answer the barrage of questions Hillary bombarded him with. Instead, he rushed to the car's trunk and fished out 2 large bags. He was halfway across the garage with them when the door flew open and several armed officers fell upon him. It turns out Don had been part of a massive crime syndicate in the city for years. He'd been using Hillary, their child and home, to cover his tracks and had succeeded for almost a decade. But there was something even worse. The worst thing the police revealed to Hillary was that Don had 2 other families in the city. He was an architect to one of the women and another, a celebrated screenwriter in Hollywood. After the police caught him, they revealed receipts of his activities, ranging from thousands of frauds, illegal possessions, and trafficking. Hillary listened attentively with tears in her eyes. She knew her nightmares had only begun.